Have you ever bitten into a crisp, juicy apple and just stopped to wonder how it even got there? I mean, how does a tiny little flower on a tree turn into that?
Well, it's not magic, but honestly, it's just as fascinating. Let's dive in and uncover the secret world of pollination.
So yeah, how does a flower become an apple? It really does seem like some kind of magic trick, doesn't it? But nope, it's pure biology. And the key that unlocks this whole amazing process is one single crucial event.
So let's get right to it. What even is pollination? You hear the word all the time, but what's actually going on? Well, it's basically the engine that drives reproduction for almost all plant life on Earth.
Okay, so there's your official textbook definition, the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. Sounds a bit dry, right? Basically, pollen has to travel from one part of a flower to another part. But let's break down what that really means.
In other words, it's how plants make seeds. That's it. It's the fundamental first step that kicks off the whole process of creating a new seed, which then leads to a new fruit, and eventually a whole new plant.
And this is why it matters so much to us. See, without pollination, there's no fertilization. And without fertilization, well, we just don't get most of the fruits, vegetables, and seeds that are so essential to our diets. It's a cornerstone of our entire food supply, no exaggeration.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Plants don't just have one playbook for this. They've actually evolved two very different approaches to get the job done. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation at all. So let's look at these two core strategies.
On one hand, you have self-pollination, where a plant uses its own pollen, and on the other, you have cross-pollination, where it gets pollen from a totally different plant. You can kind of think of it as keeping it in the family versus mixing with the neighbors. Let's dig into that first one.
First up is the conservative approach, what we can call the safe bet, self-pollination. This one is all about reliability and consistency.
The main goal here is to maintain what are called pure characters. That just means the offspring will be almost identical to the parent. And, if you're a plant that's perfectly adapted to where you live, why would you change a winning formula? And many of our most important crops actually rely on this strategy. Staple foods like peas, wheat, and rice, they all play it safe with self-pollination. For us, that means a consistent and predictable harvest. Another huge advantage is self-sufficiency. These plants don't have to depend on pollinators like bees or even hope the wind blows just right to get the job done. They can handle it all themselves, in-house, which is a massive advantage if pollinators are scarce.
But then, you've got the other strategy, which is much more of a high-risk, high-reward situation. This is the big gamble, cross-pollination.
The goal here is the exact opposite of playing it safe. It's all about creating genetic variation. By mixing pollen from different plants, you're basically shuffling the genetic deck and creating brand new combinations.
And you see this strategy in all sorts of plants, like maize, those beautiful sunflowers, and tropical papayas. They all rely on getting a little help from the outside, getting pollen from another plant to reproduce.
So what's the payoff for this gamble? Well, it's a big one. You get healthier and stronger offspring. This genetic diversity makes the next generation more resilient and much better able to adapt to new diseases, pests, or even a changing climate.
So we really have these two opposing forces at play in the plant world. The consistency you get from purity versus the adaptive power you get from diversity. Let's put them side by side to really see the trade-offs clearly.
Okay, this table lays it all out pretty well. For the pollen source, it's the same plant versus a different plant. For the genetic outcome, you get those pure, consistent characters with self-pollination versus that really valuable genetic variation with cross-pollination. And this leads directly to the offspring's quality. Consistent, sure, but maybe a little vulnerable, versus being healthier and stronger.
So the crucial point here is this fundamental trade-off. There's no single best way. It's this constant evolutionary balancing act between the safety of creating a reliable copy of yourself and the long-term strength that only comes from embracing diversity.
And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought. We know that variation leads to stronger, healthier offspring that can adapt and survive much better. So, given that, why would any plant ever choose the safe route? Why would it ever decide to play it safe and just self-pollinate? Definitely something to think about.